Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1040 just came out, and as you can imagine, I am very happy with the outcome of this fight. And before we get into it, we actually have to talk about the cover story, because as expected, yeah, this cover story arc is turning out to be the most interesting cover story arc that I think we've ever had, right? Because is this not the most interesting singular cover story chapter we've ever had, with a Yonko defeating Germa 66? When have we ever gotten something like that in a cover story? Normally we just have to mentally fill in the gaps of things that happen off screen, but, you know, even if it's just a single panel of seeing, you know, Big Mom just beating up Niji and Yonji like a cartoon character, it's still cool to get that confirmation that this is what Big Mom did to them after she arrived. Maybe we get information on what happened to the Sun Pirates. It opens up a lot of possibilities for how much information we could be getting out of this cover story arc. So yeah, I think this might be the coolest thing that's, I mean, you know, we've had poneglyph reveals and things like that in cover stories, but I guess action-wise, this is the highest level action we've ever had in a cover story. So that aside, the chapter itself, which also happened to be very Big Mom focused, I think that the way that this fight ended up, I really like it because of a few reasons, my own agenda obviously, but second of all was just the fact that I think it made everyone look good, right? I like fights where, you know, nobody at the end is being made to, like, it's not like we're coming away from it being like, oh, Big Mom's a joke or something like that, or Kid and Law are jokes or whatever, you know what I mean? I mean, some people are obviously always going to say things like that, but in my opinion, this did make everyone look good. Last chapter was Kid and Law's time to flex. A lot of us, myself included, thought that they just straight up KO'd Big Mom, right? They put all they had into their strongest attacks. They pulled out basically every trick up their sleeve. Well, Law had one more trick, as we found out this chapter, but all the most important tricks up their sleeve, right? All the most devastating attacks that they had. And it looked like, yeah, they had successfully KO'd an Emperor. So that was their time to flex, right? And from that chapter, you know, you see a lot of conversations, some people even saying, oh, Kid and Law, they could take on an admiral or something like that, like individually, some absurd stuff. But then, you know, coming out of this chapter, then it's revealed that, okay, no, they gave basically literally everything that they had. And Big Mom, she's still Big Mom. She handled it just fine. According to her, she refers to the attack as just tickling her, right? And she's ready to go another round. If you look at the state that Kid and Law are in at the end of this chapter versus like how Big Mom was acting, she was ready to go another round. So at the end of the day, no, Kid and Law, even with every single thing that they have, all of the firepower that they can throw at her, the strongest moves, completely drained of energy, etc., they can't put down Big Mom. Right? But they can still defeat her, right? They got her off of Onigashima, they got her out of the battlefield, they got her out of the picture. That is a defeat, right? They won this fight. No, they're not strong enough to just straight up put her down, but with their teamwork, with their tricks, etc., they're able to, you know, get that, you know, that ring out sort of victory, right? They knocked her out of the ring, right? Which is a victory. It's good, right? It counts, right? We got the narrator text box and everything like that. So I think, in my opinion, good showings for everybody all around. Kid and Law got their symbolic victory while still not changing the idea that Big Mom, she's a Yonko, she's a monster, she's stronger than the two of them even combined. So I like that stuff. Now, beyond that, the actual defeat of Big Mom, like how it happened. So again, on her end, I think what my favorite panel was from this chapter was actually Big Mom when she's even on the ground being shot by Kid's, you know, his strongest move, right? At that moment, she's still releasing all of this black lightning while simultaneously sucking out the souls of all of the fodder around her, right? I thought that's a really, really cool panel. I'm actually really interested. I'm looking forward to reading some of these chapters when they get, you know, when they eventually get colored like 2 years down the line or whatever. But I think that's a chapter or a panel that I really want to go back to because, I don't know, just how is it that when she's on the ground, she's still so intimidating with just how she's simultaneously brushing off this attack, releasing so much of her energy, and literally sucking out the lifespan of like all of these individual low-level fodder characters around her who are like fleeing away from her. I think that makes her actually look really, really strong, really intimidating. I think that, you know, it's just a reminder of who Big Mom is. But flip side, Kid and Law's end, yeah, Kid's first attempts with the attack didn't work, but we know, you know, you fail once, you try again, right? I like the fact that Law, well, I don't know about this. Does Law just have every ability? Why can he silence people now? This was a whole silencing, removing sound. That's a whole nother devil fruit. That's an entire Devil Fruit. That's all of Corazone's ability. Corazone's entire ability, that is just one small, extremely niche aspect of what Law can do, right? Like, Law has 50 other abilities, and it's like, oh, and I can do that whole other Devil Fruit ability of silencing things as well. So Law just has all the abilities, pretty insane. And it came, I like how Oda found a way to make that niche ability of silencing characters come into play here, right? Because that's not a, extremely useful combat ability in general. But with this specific opponent, this specific, scenario where Big Mom does require, her homies to be able to, like, obey her beck and call, right, and come to her assistance, that is actually a useful ability. It does inconvenience Big Mom to not be able to call out to her homies. It's so weird saying she can't call out to her homies, but, that was a good use of a very niche ability that you normally would not expect to have a lot of use against in battle, especially against a Yonko, right? It allowed Law to basically separate Big Mom from her homies, obviously, so Big Mom cannot rely on, any of her flying homies to basically save her from being dropped down this hole. I liked the double spread panel quite a bit, or not a double spread, you know what I mean? The big panel, quite a bit of Kid in the back, like Kid in the background basically shooting Big Mom with his final attack, and Law cutting Misery, in the foreground. Thought that was a cool way to show both Kid and Law getting their final hits in. Kid, of course, being the finisher, I guess, as he has been throughout this fight. But as we know, not to underrate Law, I personally think, I've said this before and people don't get what I'm saying, but I think that Law contributed more to the fight overall, right? And I think in this chapter as well, the utility stuff that Law was doing was really, really important. And I think overall Law contributed more, but I think Kid had more moments, or the only moments where he took on Big Mom 1v1, which, again, I rate higher in terms of two different discussions, right? Who came out looking like a better 1v1 fighter? That's just factually Kid, because Law had no 1v1 moments. But who contributed to defeating Big Mom more overall? I would say Law. So it's just two different discussions. I don't think people get what I'm saying when I say that. But, go ahead and argue in the comments. Anyway, Big Mom gets blasted down this hole. As she's falling, she takes out some of the bombs and the yokai. I'll talk on that in a second, but okay, because obviously Kid and Law themselves, they don't have enough firepower to actually knock out Big Mom in any sense, but they are able to kind of remove her. She inconveniently gets hit with some bombs to top it off, and she collapses into another hole. So she goes from one hole where she gets hit by bombs, falls down further, lands in a bigger hole where she gets blown up with more bombs. So that's a good way to get her out of the battlefield for the moment temporarily, right? Good stuff. I think, again, symbolic victories and all that, and it logically makes sense why Big Mom would not be part of the fight for a little bit. So, like that. The fall for Big Mom, when she's getting that monologue, right, about Roger, etc., that was something cool. That was not something I would have expected her to be thinking about. Just her referencing Roger during her defeat is just, I don't know. I think anytime you get a Roger reference, a character is just reminiscing or recalling him or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, it's usually out of the blue. You would not expect them to be thinking about that at that point in time, but it's like Whitebeard in his dying breath, right? He flashes back to Roger, things like that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we get Kaido. We saw him already seeing the silhouettes of Roger around Luffy. I wouldn't be surprised if near Kaido's defeat we end up having him reminisce about Roger in some sense. So I think it's always cool when, like, Roger remains this sort of, he's so important, but at the same time not referenced that much in the series, right? Which makes it more meaningful when characters do reference him and do recall him. And, I think that alone made the moment of Big Mom falling, like that little monologue that she's having, like, inherently interesting. And her perspective on it, which is just like, Roger, you son of a, whatever, like, you left us, right? You gave us this huge mess with all of these kids coming after us, trying to take us down. And you didn't even tell us if the stuff you're saying is real or not, right? Is this just some huge lie that you made up? Is it real? Is this something that we should all be chasing after? Is it related to this country? We got a lot out of that little that little inner monologue from Big Mom. We got a lot of her perspective, which we haven't gotten that much of overall. and kind of just a little insight into how the Yonko themselves just might think about like the legacy that Roger left behind, because we like to think of them as, you know, they're the top dogs. They have so much more knowledge of the way the world works. They knew Roger themselves personally, right? But even they're left in the shadows, and so much of like what is really going on with this great pirate age. What is the One Piece real? What is the answer to these secrets? They know more than everybody else, but even they are left like looking at Roger like, man, what is this? Like, we're chasing after your ghost as well, the same as everybody else. They don't know that much more than everybody else. I don't know. I think it's interesting, puts things in perspective a little bit, makes Roger look even cooler in hindsight. All that aside, do I think Big Mom is done? Again, as I've been hinting at, or basically saying throughout this, no, this is basically the best way you could write a symbolic victory for Kid and Law, removing Big Mom from the battlefield, while also having it clearly be a very temporary defeat. I mean, Big Mom's not, as far as we know, she's not even temporarily knocked out. We have no idea. Maybe with those explosives to top things off, but we literally just dropped her down a hole. So, to me, sets things up perfectly for a resurgence of Big Mom. Seems like a very, very temporary situation for her, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll find out. Probably 5, 6, 10 chapters, something like that. Now, beyond that, the other aspects of this chapter, I was really surprised at how efficient this chapter was, because on the one hand, you could be like, oh, it's a chapter that just focused on Big Mom falling through the hole, but we actually got the Yamato yokai situation solved right here, and it looks like Raizo Fukurokuju. So, it's an extremely efficient chapter, because I thought Yamato and the yokai would be its own whole own thing. Honestly, I still wish it was, because now I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, so we spent a lot of time watching Yamato run back up Onigashima, zigzag through the rooms, run into characters and stuff, go all the way down the stairs, then have these scenes like with the yokai and everything, but like for the most part, it was just resolved by Big Mom falling through the hole. Yes, Yamato did freeze those bombs, but I don't know, I just thought that we were setting up for for Yamato to get some sort of a scene or some sort of, maybe some character moment, as she very desperately needs, probably more than any of the Wano characters at the moment. So that could still be coming with, Momonosuke seemingly believing that it's important that Yamato knows that Zunisha is on its way. Maybe she's just a sounding board at the moment for Momonosuke to explain what he knows about Zunisha, or like why this is important. But I like to think that Yamato, maybe there is still something for her to do, or something important for her character that can come out of this. I don't know. We'll find out. But yokai situation resolved. Raizo Fukurokuju. Okay, say what you will about Raizo Fukurokuju. I'm gonna say that I think that all along it was okay. I think I get it with this fight, like with this chapter. All along it was like, why are we even cutting back to this? But it makes sense if you're. This is one of those cases where, you're binging it, different perspective. You're cutting back to this fight, and like each time the stakes of the fight, even though it's a very minor fight, are increasing. But more importantly, right, like the flames are increasing, the amount the characters are, being pushed is increasing. I think Raizo Fukurokuju in this little fire showdown, whatever, it was more so a sort of, a symbolic little test of spirit that's happening in the background as the other characters are doing their thing in the foreground. You know what I mean? Like, it's more just like a little symbolic thing that's happening, right? So like the chapter where they finally take down Big Mom, they show how strong their spirit was, they persevered, etc., right? Kid and Law persevered. That's the chapter that Raizo, even while he's absolutely burning up, he's the one who's like the last person left standing between him and Fukurokuju, because Fukurokuju could not stand the heat. Like, he could not stand the heat, right? So, I think it's more so just like it's just the symbolism of it, right? The symbolism of Raizo Fukurokuju, that little heat battle happening in the background, things are heating up. At the end of it, juxtaposed with Kid and Law overcoming Big Mom and staying strong till the end. Kid and Law not being afraid of Yonko, not backing down, all that life or death stuff, right? And ultimately getting the win. Same thing, being mirrored with Raizo Fukurokuju. So that's how I interpret it. We were never set to get an actual fight between those two. It was purely symbolic. Call it a waste of time, or whatever you will, but I think if you're binge reading, you probably don't think it's a waste of time. So it's my take on Raizo Fukurokuju. I don't have to say his name anymore. He's defeated, right? So Raizo and the ninja. Besides that, the last little thing, well, before the big thing, which is Zunisha, Zoro. So Zoro, Grim Reaper's gone. We see Brook. So the Grim Reaper was not Brook. it's a vision that Zoro was seeing from the drugs is the headcanon that I guess we are all collectively probably going to go with, or we just open up a huge new can of worms with how death actually works in One Piece. Are we going to be seeing Grim Reaper figures consistently? I'm cool with seeing a Grim Reaper consistently, but not if it ends up with us going down the route of like characters interacting with previously dead characters because there's this afterlife stuff, and you know, like I really hope that's not the direction we go. But easiest headcanon for the moment. Easiest headcanon for the moment is, of course, that it was just hallucination that Zoro was having from, from the drugs. Now, little small thing to think about. Might be reading too much into it, but little small thing to think about is that this is actually, I was rereading and realized that this is not Zoro's first encounter with a Grim Reaper figure this arc. Okay? Zoro and Kamazo, Killer back when he worked for Orochi. Kamazo was a Grim Reaper. Zoro literally fought a Grim Reaper earlier in this arc. And I'm not just saying, oh, that's because Kamazo kind of looks like a Grim Reaper. No, Zoro literally says Grim Reaper in the chapters following that fight. He was like, who was that Grim Reaper? It's very deliberate. Zoro fought a Grim Reaper earlier in this arc, and now he's again seeing a Grim Reaper in front of him. What does that mean? I don't know. We know Zoro's not gonna die, but it's just an interesting little recurring idea. I already put out that video talking about how Wano is an arc about death, but that is a bit of visual symbolism. Zoro fighting death a while back that I didn't even include in that video because this was something that occurred to me on a recent reread. So I don't know. Again, I don't know what that means. Maybe it means nothing, but all I'll say is that on average, each arc, the number of Grim Reapers that Zoro sees is about 0, and this one, it's 2. So just weird that it happened twice, right? Now, last thing is Zunisha, right? So looks like next chapter, hopefully next chapter is gonna be Momonosuke chapter. I thought it'd take us a little bit longer to get to Momonosuke just because, Yamato, Raizo, etc., but it seems like it all wrapped up this chapter. Might be Momonosuke and Hiyori at the same time, because I have a feeling that maybe Hiyori's stuff won't take too long. But I'm like, the stuff that Momonosuke knows and the stuff that Yamato knows, they have so much more knowledge than everybody right now because they've taken a peek at Oden's logbook. So I think next chapter's conversation is going to be very interesting. The light that's shed on what Zunisha is going to be, I don't know, we'll find out. So Joy Boy's, he was Joy Boy's companion. That can be interpreted in many different ways. We'll just find out. I'm not going to try and speculate anything at all. Was Joy Boy some sort of a gigantic giant? Was Zunisha always an elephant? Like, what was the, I'm going to leave that for next chapter. I think that's just an exciting cliffhanger to leave for next chapter. And beyond that, I think I really like this chapter, as I told you all, so I will talk to you all later.